My father used to say that sound is a living thing, that if you listen closely enough, you can hear the soul of the room breathing back at you. When I was 16, I believed him. When I was 24, I stopped. The studio was supposed to be ours. He had promised it years before. When it's done, you'll finally have a space of your own. No interruptions. No borrowed time. I imagined its walls lined with foam, the red glow of the recording light, the hum of life captured in microphones older than I was, but promises fade faster than reverb. When it was finished, he handed the keys to my brother, Noah. "He's ready," Dad said, clapping him on the back. "He's got the drive, the vision." I was standing right there, holding the notebook that held every song I'd written since high school. The air went heavy, the way it does before a storm. Noah didn't even look at me. He was already planning his first session, his first crowd, his first headline. For weeks after, I couldn't bear to walk by the place. The windows glowed at night, laughter leaking out, drums bleeding through drywall, the smell of cheap beer and ambition hanging in the air. I wrote in silence instead. Lyrics scribbled on grocery receipts. Melodies hummed into my phone in parking lots. Fragments of songs that had nowhere to live, until I realized I didn't need his studio. I just needed sound. The first underground session happened in a basement that smelled of wet concrete and cigarette smoke. 4 local kids, each with voices that carried more truth than any studio-perfect recording. I set up my secondhand laptop, a cracked interface, and one condenser mic rescued from a pawn shop. The sound was raw, imperfect, alive. And for the first time since Dad's betrayal, I felt that breath in the room again. The pulse of something that couldn't be bought, borrowed, or taken away. I called the project Backroom Sessions. It wasn't much at first, just me, a few friends, and late nights that blurred into dawn. But every track we uploaded found listeners. Every story we told made people feel seen. And slowly, quietly, the underground began to hum louder than the studio across town. Dad still didn't know. Noah thought I'd given up. I was building something different. Not a studio, a legacy. It started with a single upload, a live take. No polish, no mix, just truth. A girl from the East Side singing about her brother in prison. Her voice cracked halfway through, but the world leaned in. Thousands of streams in a week. Comments flooding in. Where did this come from? Why does it sound so real? That's when I realized the difference between their studio and mine. In his, they recorded perfection. In mine, we recorded honesty. Word spread quietly, like rumor, like gospel. Musicians started showing up at my door. People who'd been turned away, overlooked, or told they weren't commercial enough. They came with trembling hands, battered guitars, and stories too heavy for polite company. I let them play. I hit record, and each take, no matter how imperfect, became a confession captured in sound. Dad didn't notice. Not yet, but Noah did. He called one night. "Hey, someone told me you're recording people in basements now." "Not people," I said. "Artists," he laughed. "You really think that's going somewhere?" "It already has." He didn't respond, and I didn't fill the silence. For the first time, I felt like the feedback loop had reversed. He was hearing me now, even if he didn't understand. The local paper wrote a feature. The Backroom Sessions, a new kind of sound rising from the underground. They didn't mention my last name. I preferred it that way. I wanted the work to speak louder than the bloodline that had silenced me. Noah's name, though, it came up in the comments. People compared. This sounds more alive than anything from Northlight Studios. Noah's stuff feels hollow next to this. You can't buy that kind of soul. The loop had begun. One night, after a long session, I sat in my car outside the original studio. The lights were still on. Through the tinted glass, I could see my father and Noah listening to a playback. Everything looked clean, calculated, safe. Then, in the quiet between their music and mine, I realized something. They didn't own the sound anymore. I did. Not just mine. Everyone's they'd ignored. By the time Noah found out who ran Backroom Sessions, it was too late. The local college had invited me to host a workshop. A podcast wanted an interview. And the musicians I'd recorded had started their own shows, their own followings. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. It was reclamation. It was proof that truth could outlast inheritance. That night, I uploaded a new track, my own song. The first words I'd ever recorded publicly under my own name. You built your studio on promises. I built mine on echoes and dust. Yours holds walls, mine holds voices, and they'll outlive both of us. Within hours, it went viral. My father called the next morning. "You've been busy?" he said softly. "Just keeping a promise," I replied. He didn't ask which one. He already knew. It happened slowly, like a mix shifting from one track to another. At first, they tried to ignore me. Then they tried to compete. But art has a way of exposing what's real. And Backroom Sessions had become more than a name. It was a movement. Every Friday night, we released a new song. Each one stripped raw, unfiltered, recorded in spaces that still smelled of rust and rain. People called it honest music, the kind that made you stop whatever you were doing and listen. Meanwhile, Noah's releases grew slicker, emptier. You could hear the money in the mix, perfect, hollow, sterile. One evening, scrolling through comments, I saw the sentence that marked the turning point. Northlight sounds expensive. Backroom sounds alive. That's when I knew we'd crossed over. The sound had shifted, and they couldn't bring it back. Dad invited me to dinner that week. The table was perfectly set, the air heavy with the smell of old wine and expectation. He poured me a glass and smiled like nothing had ever happened. "You're doing well," he said. "It's impressive." "It's real," I replied. "It's also risky," he warned. "No structure, no studio, no protection. That's the point." Noah sat beside him, silent, his jaw tight. He looked like a man trying to hold on to something that kept slipping through his fingers. "You used our name," he said quietly. "No," I corrected. "You used it. I'm just giving it back its meaning." The silence that followed was louder than any sound I'd ever mixed. A week later, Northlight Studios posted an announcement, a partnership with Backroom Sessions, merging the old and the new. I hadn't agreed to anything. They were trying to reclaim me, to fold my rebellion into their brand, to make my voice part of their legacy instead of its undoing, so I responded the only way I knew how. I recorded a track titled Crossfade, a haunting piano loop, a whisper of static, and a single line repeated like confession. You can't buy the truth. You can only hear it. It dropped at midnight. By morning, Northlight's social pages were flooded with comments. They're stealing her sound. She doesn't need them. The underground just won. Dad called again, this time his voice quieter. "You don't have to make this a war." "It already was," I said. "You just never heard the other side." He sighed, and I could hear, in that pause, the sound of a man realizing the echo of his own choices. Noah didn't speak to me for weeks. But I saw him once, outside a venue where one of my artists was playing. He stood in the shadows listening, not clapping, not smiling, just listening. And for a fleeting moment, I thought maybe he understood what I'd been trying to create all along. Not revenge, resonance. A sound that couldn't be silenced, even by bloodlines or broken promises. By the time spring rolled around, Backroom Sessions had outgrown me. What started in basements and borrowed spaces had turned into something people carried with them. On playlists, in protests, at kitchen tables where truth still mattered. I didn't own it anymore. I just began it, and maybe that was the point all along. The city hosted its first open sound festival, a mix of independent and established artists. Northlight Studios sponsored it, of course. Their logo on every banner, every stage. But half the lineup? Mine, Dad called a week before the show. "They want you to close the festival," he said. "They?" "The committee. The audience loves your work." A pause. Then softly, "I think you should take it." I almost said no. But then I thought, maybe the best revenge wasn't silence. Maybe it was sound. The night of the festival, the crowd stretched past the gates. People held phones high, faces glowing under the stage lights. Somewhere in the front row, I saw Noah, hands in pockets, looking smaller than I remembered. Behind him, Dad stood perfectly still. I stepped up to the mic. No announcements. No introductions. Just the hum of the city behind me and 1,000 heartbeats waiting. The track was new. The last song I'd written. Simple, honest, a melody that felt like home. You gave me silence, I learned to sing. You closed the door, I built a wing. Every echo, every scar, became the sound of who we are. The crowd was quiet, not because they were bored, but because they were listening, truly listening. For once, the sound filled the space without needing to compete, to prove, to outshine. When the last note faded, I lifted my eyes. Dad's expression was unreadable. Not pride, not shame, something between. Noah, though, he clapped just once, then again, and again, until the whole crowd followed. For the first time, I didn't feel like an outsider to my own story. After the show, Noah found me backstage. He looked tired but softer. "You did it," he said. "I did what?" "Made it real." He held out something, a small keychain. "The studio key, the one I'd wanted years ago. Dad wants you to have it," he said. "I don't need it," I replied. "I know. That's why it's yours." That night, I drove past Northlight Studios one last time. The lights were off. For the first time, the building didn't feel like something I'd lost. It felt like a relic, a monument to what used to matter. I rolled down the window. The wind carried faint echoes of music from somewhere downtown, probably one of the artists I'd recorded, now performing their own truth. It hit me then. Legacy isn't about ownership. It's about continuity, and revenge, when done right, doesn't destroy. It redefines. I drove home and opened my laptop. One last upload. Title: The Final Track Artist. The Backroom Sessions. The description was only one line. Dedicated to every voice that learned to sing in silence. The upload bar filled slowly, pixel by pixel. When it hit 100%, I closed my eyes. The city hummed outside, alive with the sound of stories reclaiming themselves. I didn't need applause. I didn't need permission. I had what I came for, a sound that was mine, a truth that would outlive us all.